Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament gospel, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. And today we are looking at Annas or Ananias. It depends on what version of the, how it's translated and stuff. Um, uh, questioning Jesus. So we're going to read this. This is in John 18 verses 12 through 24. John's the only one who captures this portion of it, but we're going to see a couple of things happen in this section, and so I'm going to go through the whole thing. Typically I wouldn't read all this, but there's a lot that happens here that I want to hit. So John 18 verse 12 says, so the soldiers that the soldiers, their commanding officer, and the temple guards arrested Jesus and tied him up. First they took him to Annas, since he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest at the time. We're going to talk about that. Caiaphas was the one who had told the other Jewish leaders it's better that one man should die for the people. And then we see a little bit of a switch here. Simon Peter followed Jesus, as did another of the disciples. Most scholars believe that this was John, right? The other disciple, because he refers to himself as the other disciples, and many times throughout John. The other disciple was acquainted with the high priest, so he was allowed to enter the high priest's courtyard with Jesus. Peter had to stay outside the gate. Then the disciple who knew the high priest spoke to the woman watching at the gate, and she let Peter in. The woman asked Peter, "You're not one of that man's disciples, are you?" "No," he said, "I am not." Because it was cold, the household servants and the guards had made a charcoal fire. They stood around it, warming themselves, and Peter stood there warming himself. So we see Peter's first denial here. And so then it's inside, right? And so John, who wrote this, would have been inside and would have been able to witness what was happening. Inside, the high priest began asking Jesus about his followers and what he had been teaching them. And Jesus replied, "Everyone knows what I teach." That wasn't a strange thing, right? It wasn't a secret. "I have preached regularly in the synagogue and the temple where the people gather. I have not spoken in secret. Why are you asking me this question? Ask those who heard me. They know what I said." Then one of the temple guards standing nearby slapped Jesus across the face. "Is this the way to answer the high priest?" he demanded. Jesus replied, "If I said anything wrong, you must prove it. But if I am speaking the truth, why are you beating me?" Then Ananias bound Jesus and sent him to Caiaphas, the high priest. And so, man, I wonder what that guy that slapped Jesus is doing now. I mean, obviously we know he's not alive, but I just wonder what happened to him. It would have been interesting to get his backstory. So we have John, all right. This is in John 18:24, and so Jesus was immediately taken to the high priest's residence, even though it was the middle of the night. Again, this was against Jewish law. The religious leaders were in a hurry. They wanted to complete the execution before the Sabbath and get on with the Passover celebration. They were trying to just kill Jesus, and get on with what they were doing. Both Annas or Ananias and Caiaphas had been high priests. Annas was Israel's high priest from AD 6 to 15, but he was disposed by the Roman rulers. He must have done something to upset him. And so Caiaphas, his son in law, was appointed high priest from AD 18 to around 36, 37. But the thing here is, according to Jewish law, the office of high priest was held for life, like our Supreme Court, right? Today, the Supreme Court, you hold that position for life. And so many Jews, therefore, still considered Annas as the high priest and still called him by that title. And so they still looked at him. So although um, he retained much authority among the Jews, Caiaphas had to make the final decisions because he was the official high priest that we see there. And so, but what we do see with both of these is that both of them cared more about their political ambitions than they did about their responsibility to lead people to God. And that is a problem we see a lot, right? We see a lot of people who they're more worried, and I'm talking about in the church here, they're more worried about their position and position of power than they really are about the people they're supposed to be serving. I've witnessed this. I've dealt with this. I've seen this, right, firsthand, where they're willing to do and go against their law in order to make the people happy or to keep themselves in positions of power or for money or for other things like that. And we have that problem in the church as well. People care more about their position and their position of power than they do about the people that they're called to serve. And so we need to make sure that we don't get caught up in this kind of. And I've talked about this a lot, so I'm not going to go into great detail. But us as Christians in the church, we need to make sure we call this behavior out. We need to make sure that we don't allow this to happen. There's too many people just sitting on the sidelines allowing it to happen, and they know it's happening. And that's the thing, but it's all done in the name of unity. Well, we don't want to cause disruption, or that's not what we're called to do. If you have leaders in the church behaving this way, you should take care of it. If you have anyone in the church behaving this way, you should take care of it and handle it and correct it. But anyways, but so though they were religious leaders, they had become evil. And again, and you're not going to like me to say this, but there is evil people in the church, right? The devil can use people in the church who call themselves Christians, right, to destroy the church. I mean, what's the best way to do it but to try to destroy it from the inside? And so we see this happening a lot of times. And so we've got to be very careful about who we put into positions of leadership, and then we have to hold them to a higher standard. And sometimes that's not fair, but life's not fair. But if you're going to be leading the church, the Christ church, right, if you're going to be leading that, then you definitely need to be held to a higher standard, because you could lead people down the wrong path. And so we got to be careful with that. Like I mentioned before, the other disciple was more than likely John. When he wrote several times about the other disciple, it was about himself. He knew the high priest and identified himself to the woman at the door. Because of his connections, John was able to get himself and Peter into the courtyard, and so he was able to witness this discussion that was had between the high priest and Jesus. But then we see Peter's refusal to identify himself as Jesus's follower. So this is the first denial. And so what Peter is going to experience in the next few hours would change his life. It would change his life. And so he's going to deny Christ. He's going to deny him continuously. He's going to double down and triple down on it. And we're going to see that here in the next couple of days. So again, they're rushing through this process. They're trying to, they're going through the questioning. We see them, this is the first time where they're abusive to Jesus. That's going to escalate and get worse as we go through the next couple of days, and we see all that. As always, I appreciate everyone for watching and following along. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate all the kind comments. I appreciate all the, the encouragement from others, and I really do appreciate that. If you haven't followed us, subscribe to us on YouTube, go ahead and do that. We're going to continue to put out different studies as we continue and go along. And as always, I appreciate everyone for watching.